The anxiety of losing a wallet or a credit card is a unique, sinking feeling. It usually starts with a pat-down of empty pockets, a frantic search through the bottom of a purse, and then the slow, creeping dread that something valuable is no longer in your possession. For one woman in Tampa, Florida, that anxiety quickly escalated into full-blown alarm when she didn't just realize her card was gone. She realized someone else was already using it. Our story begins not with the thief, but with the victim at the upscale International Plaza and Bay Street Mall in Tampa. This is not a strip mall with a dollar store and a discount shoe outlet. This is a destination for luxury and designer goods, a place where a single handbag can cost more than a used car. The victim had been shopping, moving through the gleaming hallways of the mall, unaware that she had dropped her debit card somewhere in the vast parking garage. It was a simple mistake, the kind anyone could make. But what happened next would turn a minor inconvenience into a major crime. As the victim continued her day, her phone buzzed with a notification she did not expect. It was a fraud alert from her bank. The message was stark and jarring. "Are you trying to buy from Louis Vuitton store? $3,870. She stared at the screen, her heart probably sinking. She was standing in a different part of the mall, nowhere near the Louis Vuitton boutique. Someone else had her card, and they were trying to drop nearly $4,000 on luxury goods. Her immediate reaction was to hit reject or decline on the alert, hoping to stop the transaction in its tracks. She thought she had solved the problem. She was wrong. Moments later, another notification appeared. This time, it was from Nordstrom, another anchor store in the mall. The charge was for over $1,000. And this time, the victim had not been fast enough. The Nordstrom transaction went through. Someone had successfully stolen over $1,000 from her using her own debit card. Panic turned into action. The victim didn't just call the bank. She went straight to the source. She drove back to the mall, found a security officer, and began explaining the situation. Her story was a frantic, real-time account of financial violation. "I was shopping here," she explained, her voice laced with confusion and urgency. "I didn't buy anything. And then I look at my phone and my credit card is like, 'Are you trying to buy from Louis Vuitton store? $3,870. She explained that she declined it, but then the Nordstrom charge slipped through. Her plan was simple. Go to the stores, find the person who did this, and get her card back. This is where law enforcement enters the picture. Responding to the call, police officers arrived at the mall and immediately began piecing together the timeline. Their first stop was the Louis Vuitton store, the scene of the attempted high-dollar crime. They spoke with a store manager, a calm professional who deals with wealthy clients and, occasionally, fraudsters. The officer explained the victim's report. She had come to the store, said a fraudulent charge was attempted there, and wanted to investigate. The manager's response was immediate and illuminating. He explained that just moments before the victim had walked in to report the crime, the store had declined a transaction for that exact amount, $3,870. The timing was too perfect to be a coincidence. The manager provided crucial details. The transaction had been handled by a sales associate named Taylor. The client who had tried to make the purchase had given a name upon checking in for her appointment: Laura. This was a critical red flag. The victim's name, the actual owner of the card, was also Laura. The person trying to use the stolen card was not just committing fraud. She was committing identity theft in real time, pretending to be the cardholder right in front of the sales staff. When the card was declined, the woman didn't panic or argue. Instead, according to the manager, she acted casually, saying she was in a hurry and would just come back later. She then quickly exited the store, but she didn't go far. The manager told police that the woman stood just outside the store, near a specific area, and was joined by a man. This man had not been with her inside the store during the first attempt. The two stood together, talking for a period of time. Then, in a brazen move that would seal her fate, the woman walked right back into the Louis Vuitton store. She was attempting the purchase again. she was going for a second try at stealing the $3,870 bag, apparently hoping for a different result. The police had arrived just as this second act was unfolding. The officer asked the manager a simple question. "Do you see the young lady? Can you point her out to me?" The manager's answer was quick and certain. "Yes, absolutely. She's the one wearing the black dress with a tattoo on her left arm." With a clear description and a suspect currently inside the store, the officers moved in. They waited outside, knowing that the woman would have to exit eventually. They watched as she left the boutique, now accompanied by the same older man who had joined her earlier. They were walking together, perhaps thinking they had gotten away with something, or at least that the failed transaction was just a minor hiccup. The officers approached them in a common area of the mall, blocking their path. "You mind if I talk to you guys for a second?" an officer asked calmly. The woman, whose name we would later learn is Valerie Sahai, agreed. But her demeanor was about to shift dramatically. She was about to be confronted with the evidence, and her first instinct was the oldest one in the book: deny everything. The officer, maintaining a professional and patient tone, began his interrogation. "So earlier, were you here and made a purchase on a credit card, or tried to make a purchase?" The answer came immediately and definitively. "No," the officer pressed. "No? You weren't just here a little while ago and tried to make one and it got declined?" Again, a firm denial. "No." "So, not you?" "No," the officer confirmed. "Are you sure?" The woman, Valerie, began to construct her alibi on the fly. She claimed she had just arrived at the mall not too long ago, specifically to meet her man, the older gentleman standing next to her. She denied being there earlier. She denied trying to buy anything. It was a simple, straightforward lie. The only problem was that every word of it was contradicted by the store manager, the transaction logs, and the dozens of surveillance cameras watching her every move. This is where the tension of the story truly begins. The officer, knowing the truth, gently but firmly pushes back. He tells her that the store had a declined transaction and that the suspect stood outside, and then rejoined her man. Valerie interrupts, trying to control the narrative. "Yeah, but I've known him for a while. What are you trying to get to?" The officer explains that the store reported a purchase attempt, and then, in a moment of confusion or perhaps a slip of the tongue, Valerie says, "That was me." She immediately tries to walk it back, mumbling about scoping out the store. The officer seizes on the contradiction. Minutes ago, she said she wasn't there. Now, she's admitting the transaction was hers. Her story is already falling apart. When the officer asks if she used a specific type of card, like an American Express or airline card, she says no. When asked for her ID, she claims she doesn't have it, reiterating that she literally just came here to meet him. The officer, ever patient, lays out the truth he already knows. He mentions the cameras, the logs, and the fact that the victim is already at the mall. He asks again, directly, if she tried to purchase the bag. Finally, the dam breaks a little. "No, I tried to use my card, but I did not get anything," she admits. But this admission raises a huge question. The officer points out that she has now given him 3 different stories in a matter of minutes. She first said she didn't come earlier. Then she said she was just looking. Then she said she didn't make a transaction. And now she says she used her card. He asks to see the card she used. She hands it over. The officer looks at it, then asks a simple, devastating question. "And is this your name that is on here?" "Yes, that is my name," she replies. He asks for her birthday. He doesn't tell her what he is thinking, but the evidence is mounting. The jig is almost up. The only thing left is to connect her directly to the stolen card of the real Laura, a connection that the mall's sophisticated camera system and digital transaction logs are about to make with absolute certainty. Part 1 ends with the suspect entangled in her own web of lies, standing in the middle of a luxury mall, moments away from being positively identified as the fraudster. The atmosphere in the mall corridor had shifted. What began as a casual conversation between police and a couple leaving a luxury boutique had evolved into a tense interrogation. Valerie Sahai, the woman in the black dress, was now caught in a spiral of contradictions. She had first denied being at the mall earlier, then admitted to looking at a bag, then denied making a transaction, and finally confessed that she had, in fact, tried to use her own card. The officer, however, knew something Valerie did not yet fully understand. The card she had just handed him was not the card used in the attempted Louis Vuitton purchase. The transaction log from the store had captured a different card number, entirely one belonging to a woman named Laura who had lost her debit card in the parking garage. The officer decided to lay his cards on the table. He explained the situation clearly and calmly, as much for the benefit of the man standing beside Valerie as for Valerie herself. "Someone's card was stolen," the officer began. He explained that the victim received a notification from Nordstrom that a purchase for over $1,000 had been made. Then, another notification from Louis Vuitton for a $3,870 bag that was thankfully declined. He pointed to the ceiling, to the corners of the hallway, to the small domed cameras that watched every inch of the mall. "Every inch of this mall is monitored by a camera surveillance system," he said. He then delivered the crucial detail. The victim, whose name is Laura, had arrived at Louis Vuitton and alerted the staff. The store was able to backtrack and identify the declined transaction. The card number used in that declined transaction matched the victim's stolen credit card, and the person identified by store staff as the one who tried to use that card was Valerie. But then came the detail that elevated this from simple credit card fraud to a more brazen crime. According to the store manager, when the woman tried to make the purchase, she told the sales associate that her name was Laura. She was not just using a stolen card. She was impersonating the victim herself, trying to convince high-end retail staff that she was the rightful owner. The officer looked at Valerie. "You get what I'm saying?" he asked. He then described her movements after the declined transaction. She left the store, stood in a specific area, and was then joined by the man standing next to her. After some time, she went back into the store to try again. The man, who had been relatively quiet until this point, suddenly found his voice. He had been introduced by Valerie as her man, and he now inserted himself into the conversation with a defensive energy. He denied the officer's timeline, claiming he met Valerie at Neiman Marcus about 20 or 30 minutes ago. The officer remained focused on Valerie, but the man kept interrupting, trying to reshape the narrative. It was becoming clear that this man, older, well-dressed, and accustomed to being listened to, was not going to simply stand by while his companion was accused of a crime. The officer, growing slightly irritated by the interruptions, finally addressed him directly. "You weren't a part of the original thing at all whatsoever," the officer stated, "so you had no involvement in it whatsoever." This is where the story takes an unexpected turn. The man, realizing he is being dismissed as irrelevant to the investigation, decides to insert himself in a different way, not as a co-conspirator, but as a hero. He takes a breath and begins a new explanation. "I met her someplace else, and it took us about 20 minutes to get in there," he says, choosing his words carefully. Then he drops a bombshell. "She's been kind of hitting on me to get a bag for a little while, so she's giving me this I could give her a bag. The reason why I said, because I'm totally against spending this much money on a bag. So she talks me into it, and I do it." He explains that he went into Louis Vuitton and bought the bag himself with his own money. He claims his purchase had nothing to do with Valerie's earlier, failed attempt with the stolen card. He was simply a generous boyfriend who had been nagged into buying an expensive purse. This was a fascinating and legally significant development. According to the man's own statement, he had just spent thousands of dollars on a designer bag for Valerie. But if Valerie had already tried to steal that exact same bag using a stolen credit card just minutes earlier, what did that make him? Was he an innocent sugar daddy who walked into a crime scene unaware? Or was he the cleanup crew the person called in to complete the purchase after the stolen card failed? The officer listened to the man's story without comment, his face betraying nothing. But inside, he was likely connecting dots. The timing was too tight. The coincidence was too perfect. Valerie tries to steal the bag. The card is declined. She calls her man. And he magically appears to buy the exact same bag for her with his own money? It strained credibility. The officer, recognizing that the man was providing information but not a direct link to the stolen card, decided to simplify the situation. He told the man he was free to leave. He was not under investigation. His only purpose now was to get out of the way. "You don't need to be here," the officer said. "Actually, you can go ahead and leave. There's no point in me even talking to you because you are not a part of this whatsoever. My issue is with her." But the man refused to leave. He stood his ground, watching as the officer turned his full attention back to Valerie. The officer then delivered the words Valerie had been dreading. "Right now, you're being detained for an investigation. You're not free to leave at whatsoever." Valerie's demeanor shifted. The confidence she had shown earlier, the dismissive head shakes, the curt denials melted away, replaced by confusion and a touch of fear. She asked why she was being detained. The officer explained he was conducting an investigation into the theft of a credit card. He instructed her to stay where she was, to move against the wall if she wanted to get out of the way. The man, still hovering nearby, asked if he could stay with her. The officer told him to wait outside. The man, finally, reluctantly, stepped back. The officer then walked back into the Louis Vuitton store. It was time to watch the video. What happened next took only a few minutes. The officer was shown the store's surveillance footage. The exact contents of the video were not made public in the body cam release, but the officer's report was clear. The video allegedly showed Valerie Sahai using the stolen credit card at the checkout counter, attempting to purchase the expensive designer bag. It showed her interaction with the sales associate, her presentation of the card, and the moment the transaction was declined. It showed her leaving the store, walking to a specific location, and pulling out her phone. And then, minutes later, it showed her re-entering the store with the man. The video did not show him using a stolen card. He had claimed he used his own money, but it established a clear timeline that contradicted the couple's story. Valerie had been the primary actor in the attempted fraud. Her man had arrived after the fact. The officer emerged from the store with a new level of certainty. He walked back to where Valerie was waiting, the man hovering nearby despite being told to leave. Before the officer could speak, the man launched into another monologue. He was clearly frustrated, feeling disrespected by the process. He explained that he had gone back into the store to ask the sales associate a question. He wanted to know if she had just sold him a $3,600 bag, knowing that the woman he was with had just tried to steal it. According to the man, the sales associate replied, "I don't have to tell you anything." The man seemed offended by this, as if his status as a paying customer should have granted him access to internal store information. The officer, having just watched the video, was in no mood to entertain the man's grievances. "Dude, you keep talking," the officer said, his patience finally wearing thin. The man shot back, "That's fine. I'll keep talking." But the officer was done talking to the man. He turned to Valerie. "Alrighty, ma'am. We're going to go out to my police car, because you're under arrest right now." The words hung in the air. Valerie's eyes widened. The man fell silent. The officer asked her to turn around so he could handcuff her. What happened next was a sudden escalation of tension, captured in vivid detail on the body camera. The officer attempted to guide Valerie's hands behind her back, and she immediately began to complain. "Why do you have to be so—" she started, then changed course. "I tried to be nice. I'm not resisting. Why are you hurting my arm so bad, though?" The officer, clearly experienced in dealing with suspects who suddenly discover their rights, responded calmly but firmly. He explained that he had tried to be nice, to simply have her walk outside on her own so she wouldn't look crazy with handcuffs on in the middle of the mall. But since she was now arguing and making a scene, they would do it his way. Valerie, her voice rising, insisted she was not resisting. She simply wanted to know where the proof was. "I just watched the video," the officer replied, and it showed her card. Valerie, still trying to maintain her innocence, protested that she didn't have the victim's card and never had it. The officer was unmoved. He began walking her toward the exit, her wrists now secured behind her back. The man watched from a distance, his face caught between anger, disbelief, and the painful realization that the situation was slipping completely out of his control. He followed several steps behind, still trying to process how an ordinary shopping trip had unraveled so quickly. The officer, with Valerie now in custody, guided her through the crowded mall corridors. Shoppers slowed their pace, turning to stare at the unusual scene unfolding in front of luxury storefronts. Just an hour earlier, Valerie had been browsing inside Louis Vuitton, surrounded by polished displays, expensive handbags, and the atmosphere of wealth and exclusivity. Now, she was walking past those same stores in handcuffs, her head lowered as curious strangers whispered and watched. As they moved toward the exit, the officer continued asking the standard booking questions in a calm but professional tone. "Do you have anything on you? Any weapons, guns, knives, or anything like that?" Valerie quietly answered no. Then came the question that finally seemed to force the reality of the moment into focus. Her voice, noticeably smaller now, trembled slightly as she asked, "Am I going to jail?" The officer answered honestly, without raising his voice or adding emotion. "Probably. That's what happens when you steal. You go to jail." Valerie still held onto the version of events she had repeated throughout the encounter. "I didn't, though," she replied softly. The officer let out a tired sigh, clearly having heard similar denials many times before. "Okay, if you still want to stick with that story, okay." Moments later, he escorted her outside and toward the patrol car, leaving the man standing alone near the mall entrance, watching helplessly as she disappeared from sight. Part 2 closes with Valerie in custody, the evidence against her continuing to build, and the man who had stood beside her now left to decide how far his loyalty would truly go. Once Valerie Sahai was secured in the back seat of the patrol car, the seriousness of her situation appeared to settle over her completely. The bright lights and polished floors of the upscale mall were now replaced by hard plastic seating, the metal divider behind the officer's seat, and the lingering discomfort of a police vehicle that had carried many other people through moments they likely wished they could undo. After reading her Miranda rights from a laminated card, the officer began completing the necessary paperwork connected to the arrest. According to the police report, it was during this quieter moment, away from the crowd and the pressure of the mall, that Valerie's explanation finally changed. Although the key portion of the body camera footage was redacted, the police report later described what officers claimed Valerie admitted. She allegedly told them she had found the debit card lying on the ground inside the mall parking garage. Rather than attempting to locate the owner or turn the card over to security, she admitted she kept it and decided to use it herself. In trying to explain her actions, she reportedly stated that she believed most people would have done the same thing in her position. To investigators, however, that statement reflected a troubling attempt to normalize behavior that most people would recognize as wrong. Many individuals who find a lost debit card either leave it alone or hand it in to security personnel. Few would immediately attempt to use it for luxury purchases costing thousands of dollars. The report further detailed the sequence of events that followed. Valerie allegedly admitted that she personally attempted to purchase the Louis Vuitton handbag using the card. When the transaction was declined, the situation could still have ended there. Instead, according to the report, she contacted the man who had accompanied her earlier, the same man who had defended her during questioning. She asked him to come to the mall, and when he arrived, she persuaded him to purchase the handbag using his own money. Earlier, the man had claimed Valerie had been pressuring him to buy her a designer bag, and despite everything unfolding around them, he ultimately agreed. He entered the store and legally purchased the same item she had allegedly tried to obtain fraudulently only moments before. The contrast in those actions was difficult to ignore. Even though the bag was eventually paid for legally, the attempted fraudulent transaction had already been reported, documented, and witnessed by store employees and investigators. As the paperwork continued, the physical discomfort of the handcuffs began to visibly affect Valerie. Her hands remained restrained behind her back, and she shifted uncomfortably in the seat before finally asking, "Is there any way I could take this off or loosen something a little bit?" The officer's response, while not cruel, was firm and immediate. "Nope, nope, nope, nope." He suggested she move her arms slightly to ease the pressure, but made it clear the restraints would remain in place. A short time later, Valerie asked if she could make a phone call. The officer agreed and handed her the department-issued phone. She requested 2 calls, one to her mother and another to the man who had purchased the handbag for her earlier that day. The first call, made to her mother, was brief and largely redacted from the released footage. It was the second call, however, that became one of the most emotionally striking moments of the incident. Valerie dialed the number, and after the man answered, she immediately began apologizing in a voice filled with regret and desperation. "Babe, I'm sorry. You're on speaker right now. I'm really sorry for all of this. I didn't know this was going to happen, or else I would have never done this." There was a long pause before he responded. When he finally spoke, his tone was distant and emotionally cold. "I'm not your call." Valerie sounded confused for a moment, quietly responding. "What?" He repeated himself, more firmly this time. "I'm not your one phone call." Valerie's voice cracked. "What do you mean, babe? You can't call me?" The man was done. He explained that he was going home. Valerie, now panicking, asked if he was serious. "Yeah, I'm going home," he said. Then came the words that sealed her abandonment. "I mean, you're running around stealing credit cards." Valerie tried to explain, to minimize, to justify. "I didn't mean to. I just found it, and it was a stupid decision." The man agreed with her. Yep, it was. She told him they were taking her to jail. "I don't know how I can help you," he replied. She asked if he would bail her out the next day. His answer was a simple, brutal no. Valerie pleaded. "Seriously?" The man was unmoved. He told her to call her dad. She said her family couldn't help her, that they didn't have the money. The man's final words to her were delivered with a cold finality that must have felt like a second arrest. "You gotta deal with it. You did a really stupid thing. I can't have that in my life." The line went dead. Valerie sat in silence, the phone still in her cuffed hands. The man who had stood beside her, who had defended her to the police, who had bought her a $1,000 bag, had just erased her from his life in a 30-second phone call. The officer, who had witnessed the entire conversation, took the phone back without a word. Valerie Sahai, 31 years old, was transported to the Hillsborough County Jail. She was charged with 2 counts of fraudulent use of a credit card and 1 count of grand theft, a 3rd-degree felony. The bag, purchased legally by the man who then abandoned her, was presumably kept by him or returned to the store. The victim's stolen debit card was recovered and returned to its rightful owner. As for the case, court records in Hillsborough County no longer show it under Sahai's name. It is unclear whether the charges were dropped, reduced, or resolved through a plea agreement. What is clear is that one bad decision, finding a card and choosing to use it, cost Valerie not just her freedom for a night, but also a relationship she apparently valued. Her sugar daddy, it turned out, had a strict policy on felonies. And as the officer closed his car door and drove away from the mall, the lights of the patrol car reflected off the luxury storefronts, a silent reminder that even in a palace of consumption, some prices are too high to pay.